Dr. Daniel Stickler is the co-founder and chief medical officer of the Apeiron Center for Human Potential and chief science officer for Apeiron Academy. He's the medical director for the Neurohacker Collective, a Google consultant for wearable technology, epigenetics, and AI in healthcare, and a guest lecturer at Stanford University on epigenetics in clinical practice. Dr. Dan, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Looking
Anthony
forward to our conversation.
Hanging out with Carrie Jack, VP of Operations, and we're both pumped to talk with you. Give us a little bit of a background on how you got into this space.
I'll try to keep it brief. I got into medical school, and I had this kind of idealized concept of what medicine was going to be, and I thought it was about really, upgrading people and really taking them to a new level, and was disenchanted by the fact that it was more sick care and pharmacology. And that kind of led me down the road of surgery. Now, I always liked surgery because I always liked working with my hands. So I went into surgery because I saw that as, I could take people that had a certain quality of life. They have an event and you intervene and you bring them up to at least baseline. Got into weight loss surgery because it fit my criteria a little bit more, because I could operate on somebody and actually bring up a level of quality of life for them. I thought that was really, really kind of a cool thing to get into. And then over the years of doing it, it just, I became disenchanted with that because people looked at that as the tool to get them there, which it wasn't. It was about lifestyle. And during that process, I worked with Epigenetics, trained there. And, that was the first exposure for me of healthcare for healthy people. And I thought, well, this is different. And this is what I was looking for initially. And after about 2 years working with them, kind of branched off because I also saw limitations in that aspect too. And genetics came along in 2006, 2007 for me. People were bringing me their reports from 23andMe and saying, what does this mean? And I had no idea. It was not anything that I'd ever seen before, that kind of genetics. And so I became obsessed with learning it and probably spent 10,000 hours over the last 10 years really trying to figure it out. And we were applying it in clinical practice. And I presented it at a national conference, some nutritional stuff. And I had all these clinicians come up to me at the end and said, can you teach me how to do this? And I thought, well, I guess I probably can. So we created the Apeiron Academy. And now we have 2 medical centers in Asheville, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, getting ready to open one in Sarasota.
Oh, that's my hometown.
All right.
Yeah. It's right in our backyard. We'll be there opening day.
Yeah.
And we're also lining one up in London. So.
We're inviting the Biohacker, dude. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So that's essentially where we started and where we are today. And I mean, right now, it's our passion is to introduce people to a new paradigm of health. The old paradigm is sick care, and it's not fixable because it's really based on the human system being a complicated system, and the human system is not complicated. I mean, complicated has the requirements that the system has to be predictable 100% of the time. And as you know, I mean, the human system is far from predictable, and you can't apply the same thinking process that you would apply to a robot or an airplane to a human being or a bird. It doesn't work that way. And that complexity process is not ingrained into the old system. So what we're saying is that let's create something that really looks at the human system from a complexity approach, looks at the entire biosphere of the human. We can't, I always use the example of, the current system is, okay, you back out of your driveway and you run over a nail and you get a hole in your tire, and you take it to the shop and they repair the hole. Then you come back and you roll down your driveway again and you roll over the nail again and you go to the shop and get it fixed. And the current system is saying, okay, well, even in precision medicine, they're saying, how can we develop a better way to fix the tire? Rather than saying, okay, let's clean the driveway, or let's create a hovercraft that really doesn't have that problem in the first place. And
sweep the driveway. That's the secret there.
I mean, the simple thing. I mean,
shoot the jerk store neighbor that keeps putting nails in your driveway.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's what we do in healthcare right now. I mean, you look at 75% of what is going to kill you here in the United States. Top 10 reasons for death, it counts for 75% of deaths. You know, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, influenza, suicides, accidents. Every single one of those is modifiable through lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one. And 100%. I mean, you can tell me you have a predisposition towards diabetes and I don't care because I can completely modify that through a lifestyle practice.
Yeah.
Even accidents, people say, well, how is that lifestyle? And well, you look at
driving
accidents, sleep deprivation and alcohol, you know, those are the two top reasons for accidents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all modifiable from a lifestyle standpoint.
Mm.
And what were you seeing as you mentioned a few different things? So you talked about in your story, the weight loss surgery, and then you becoming a little bit disenfranchised with that. Was that because you saw people going back to the same behavioral patterns after the surgery, or what was it that shifted your perspective there and made you feel like there has to be a better way of doing this?
Yeah, it was fixing the tire again. Because at the same time that I was doing weight loss surgery in my clinic, we were also doing this kind of concierge wellness practice, kind of like Cenogenics. And we had people that were overweight coming into that and getting much better success long-term in weight loss than people going through a $30,000 surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of opened my eyes to what was happening. And then I also noticed that, you know, the statistics on weight loss surgery are really good for the first 2 years, and that's about all they report. But I followed my patients lifelong, and I was following some out 10 years. And the success rate dropped dramatically at about 4 or 5 years out. And long-term success, I mean, you're talking about maybe 15%.
Mm-hmm.
So now they've regained at least most of the weight back and sometimes more. And now they have the complication of surgery on top of that. And so it just didn't make any sense to me.
No.
And I'm particularly interested too in how you now see the Cenogenics approach, because I think a lot of our listeners have seen that picture of Dr. Jeffrey Life where it's like showing him at 57 years old and he's overweight on the boat. And then it shows him at 77 years old and he's like shredded and jacked. And then you've seen him in some recent things where he seems like he's become disenfranchised with that Cenogenics approach of, you know, pumping people up with HGH and high amounts of hormones that may not even necessarily be the same levels that they had in their 20s. What were you seeing there on a long-term basis?
Well, I can't get too personal about this because I'm a good friend of Jeff's, and I know more details than most on that. But Cenogenics, I mean, I give them credit. Alan Mintz, who started Cenogenics, he was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the guy, he would be sitting at his desk and he had 8 monitors in front of him and he had articles pulled up on every one of those. And all during the day when you were there, his secretary would walk around and drop articles on the physicians' desks and say, Alan wants you to read this. Alan wants you to read this. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And he created really that new paradigm of healthy healthcare. And I think it kind of got shifted after he died to more of a business model, and they didn't progress as well as I would have liked to have seen. I mean, it was more of, you know, they were focusing on the hormones as the core piece of the healthy human rather than the lifestyle and using the hormones as an accessory. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine he's a professional bodybuilder, and, you know, I noticed the big difference between the concept of the thinking process of those guys that are professionals in that sport versus the guys that are the gym rats that are, you know, using the hormones and everything. The professionals really looked at the hormonal aspects as just those little finishing pieces for what they were doing. I mean, their core in that high level group was their lifestyle and their exercise practices and their nutrition practices. And it wasn't centered around the hormone piece itself. And I saw the same process going on with Cenogenics in that regard.
Beautiful. And then how has your paradigm evolved now? What do you feel is what's your expanded view of what this world needs in order to be healthy, fit, and cognitively sound into your 80s, 90s, and beyond?
Well, it's not stovepiping these individual pieces. It's putting them all together into a system.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'll see people that'll come in and, everybody thinks, oh, well, if I just diet and exercise, I'll lose weight. And yet they're the people that are sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. And I'm like, if we can't even get that piece fixed, there's no way I'm going to get you to lose weight. It's just not going to work. I speak at a lot of, being the medical director for Neurohacker, I speak at a lot of cognitive enhancement events like Trans Tech and things like that. And they're all looking for that limitless pill. Interesting side note, Apeiron actually means limitless. It's kind of
nice.
Yeah.
You like the movie, I take it, huh?
I love the movie.
Yeah, B. Coop, good guy.
Problem is, it's just not going to happen. There is not a limitless pill. There's not going to be a limitless
Come
pill.
on, Dr. Dan, don't tell me that.
It's not happening. You got to look at the whole system, and that's what I tell these young entrepreneurs that are always looking to hack that cognitive function. I was at Trans Tech, and I said, how many of you in this room are sleeping at least 7 hours a night? And there were like 3 people in the entire room, but they all wanted cognitive enhancement. I'm like, I would not work with any of you guys.
Yeah.
Not at all, because that's just not going to happen when you don't have the system right. I mean, it's just like diet and exercise to lose weight, and it's just not going to happen if the other pieces aren't in place.
So you disagree with some of the advice that's out there saying that you can get the biological equivalent of 8 hours of restorative sleep in 5 hours?
Not happening. I mean,
I haven't found a way to make it happen either, but I have seen people in some of their marketing discussing it.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, sleep genes are phylogenetically some of the oldest genes in the tree of life. I mean, we share sleep genes with insects. I mean, that's how strong these genes are, and that's how pervasive they are in life itself. And you would think over the centuries of the way we have evolved that shorter sleep would be a survival advantage, right? The caveman that has short sleep has less time of vulnerability and things like that. But it didn't happen. We didn't have natural selection for shorter sleepers. We've maintained this sleeping requirement. So there's obviously something really strong about this. And these people that say, oh yeah, I function great on 4 to 6 hours of sleep, here's what's happening. And this has been confirmed in a lot of military studies, especially on looking at air traffic controllers. What happens is when you get 2 hours less sleep, so if you sleep 6 hours in a night, you will have the perception that you really don't have a negative impact from that over time. So you'll get this impression that, oh, I have adapted my body to work well with 6 hours of sleep. But what's actually happening is that the brain will accept lower levels of performance as normal. And so, you sleep 6 hours a night, your vigilance level is equivalent to somebody who's had 2 alcoholic drinks. You sleep 4 hours and your vigilance level is equivalent to somebody who is legally intoxicated.
Yeah, wow. but you're not nearly as fun.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Dan, what do you do to biohack your sleep? Let's hear it.
Ever since I left surgery, I have no problems with sleep. I mean, I haven't used an alarm in probably 7 or 8 years. And I wake up pretty routinely around somewhere between 5 and 5:45 every day. But I also, I make sure I get to bed before 10 o'clock. That's my routine, and that's what my body has accepted. And we try to get people to kind of understand what their sleep hygiene patterns are, because these are pretty hard coded in the genetics. And so if you had a free running clock, what would your sleep patterns be? And the human body is really designed to go to sleep with the sunset and rise with the sunrise. I mean, that's just the way that we are physiologically designed. Mm-hmm. And so once you start adapting to that, you start noticing better energy, better function, lower inflammation. I mean, the body just improves. But we have so many people that they try to force themselves into sleep patterns that aren't natural for themselves, just because, you know, they want to go out and party with their friends, or they want to stay up late playing video games. You know, the big excuse I always hear is, well, you know, that's the time I have with my wife. You know, after the kids go to bed, I've got to spend, and then I get into asking them what they're doing, and they're sitting watching TV, not even having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know, go to bed with the kids, wake up an hour or two before the kids, and have your conversations in the morning where you don't have those distractions around.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest productivity is in the morning, and most of the people that kind of switch to more morning hours, it happens to.
Well, Ant, that's when you wrote the Biohacker's Guide. What, 5 to 7 or something?
Yeah, I was getting up at like 4:45 every day, and that was, you know, when it had to happen. And I didn't always feel like $1 million, but
yeah.
What time were you going to bed though?
Yeah, I mean, I was pushing it at both ends. I was also teaching yoga and training and working with clients and writing the book, and so there was a lot of obligations during that transition period that kind of threw things off. Before we transitioned away from sleep, what other habits do you have? Do you do anything with a digital sunset? Are there any, do you do anything with CBD or magnesium or anything else to optimize your deep and REM sleep that you've found to be helpful, especially doing as much self-quant as you do?
Yeah, I do. You know, the Muse headset with some alpha training is really good for setting the stage in the evenings. I really like Muse in that regard. Doing some breath work, even with like an M wave, those work really well.
That's like the heart rate variability training, right?
Right. It's the heart math device. You know, I wear this. All of my clients wear this. It's the Garmin Fenix 5. I have no association with them. In fact, I consult with other biometric companies, but not them.
We got it. Garmin, you get that sponsorship deal. Dr. Dan.
Yeah, hey, Garmin.
Get on your game, Garmin.
But Garmin to me is the epitome of a biohacker's biometric device. I mean, it gives you stress algorithms based on first beat technology. It gives you pretty decent sleep algorithms. I mean, none of the devices are really good for sleep structure, but they at least can get your hours in. The exercise piece of the Garmin is head and shoulders above anybody else. I mean, you know, when you go for a run, it maps you, it paces you, tells you what your heart rate is at every stage of it. It tells you what your performance metrics are. It tells you what your head oscillation is. I mean, your stride length and your ground contact. And, you know, I use it with the weight training as well. And I also use a Human Hex. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's looking at tissue hemoglobin oxygenation. So it tells you when your muscles are approaching lactate threshold through oxygen differences between the arterial and venous side. It's just a little disc that you wear on your leg. Something recent that I started using and absolutely love. It's a really nice addition to that. But, you know, as far as sleep is concerned, I mean, we work with each individual based on what they need. I mean, very few people respond well to melatonin. Few people do, but we look at genetics and we can actually predict whether they're going to respond or not. We love magnesium glycinate or threonate, depending on what's required. I mean, if they have certain genetic variants, the glycinate tends to work better. We have a lot of clients that opt to use phenibut, and that works really well for some of them. You have to watch for the chronic use on that. DSIP injections, which is a peptide. Some people biohack with that. It's really good for really intermittently, not on a regular schedule, because you will develop resistance to it from what I understand. But it will pretty much put somebody down pretty quickly. But it's an injection, and it's not really approved for human use, so I can't
take a rhino out with that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the peptides are fun stuff. I mean,
oh yeah,
you know, this is the new realm. I mean, have you guys tried PT 141 yet?
No.
What BPC 157?
We've been messing with BPC 157, TB 500. I've done ibutamorin, Samoralin, and a handful of others. But we're definitely interested if you've got some that you've been having good clinical experience with.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we actually use tailor-made pharmacy, which is really the only prescription level that we can get. Most of the other stuff, we have a lot of clients. I work with a lot of people that are biohackers, so they do a lot of stuff on their own. I can kind of give them education on it, but I can't recommend it. You know, they'll use places like Peptide Sciences or something like that. You know, by far as growth hormone is concerned, the tesamorelin is the gorilla. I mean, it is really
That's the go-to, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've used Sermorelin in clients for years, but the tesamorelin, absolutely head and shoulders above.
Where do you get it? If you're listening to this and someone wants to try the best peptide out there, where would they get that?
Well, you can get tesamorelin, but it's like $1,000 a month, and it's only approved for AIDS wasting syndrome.
Oh,
but you can get it. You can get it through tailor-made pharmacy through a physician that has a contract with them.
Oh, okay.
A lot of clients actually do get it from Peptide Sciences. Again, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not approved for human use through them, but they'll still do that. I kind of like CJC 1295 with DAC. And I know this sounds terrible, but my whole reason I like it is it's only twice a week as opposed to 6 days a week.
Hey, that plays. That's important.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a ton of injections, you know, like by the time I'm done with the week, I'm like a pin cushion.
oh, you and Ant both. This guy will walk in, he's just pants down, shooting himself. Okay, see you, dude.
You know, I'm doing a cycle.
Yeah.
I'm doing Frag 176 right now, and you know, that one is twice a day. You got to do it in the morning and then do it right before your exercise, and so that's a whole new realm for me on the twice a day injections for sure.
So for those listening right now who may not have a clue about any of the items mentioned in the past 5 minutes,
The various peptides.
give them just a brief overview of what some of these actually accomplish for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is a peptide?
Yeah.
What these specific peptides can be used to help accomplish?
Yeah.
Right. So peptides are strings of amino acids, and the body actually has like 55 hormonal peptides, I think, at last count. And some of these are mimics of the body's own peptides. Some of them are modifications, just kind of like in the same realm of SARMs. They're chemically modified in order to create an outcome. The tesamorelin, sermorelin, CJC, these are what we call growth hormone releasing peptides. So they will actually stimulate the body to release its own growth hormone, which I like a whole lot better than the growth hormone itself.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, we used growth hormone for a while in our medical practice, and studies started coming out about pituitary atrophy that was occurring, and it was pan-pituitary, so the pituitary gland was actually shrinking. And so we got away from that, tried sermorelin for a while with very limited success, started adding some peptides in addition, like GHRP2 and GHRP6, which are other growth hormone releasing peptides.
Those are in Sermorelin, right?
Well, not really. I mean, you can get sermorelin with those added to it, but typically those are isolated peptides by themselves, but they enhance the effect. So you'll get sermorelin with GHRP2 or with GHRP2 and 6. One of the things I found with 6, which was interesting, is somebody told me they could eat the ass end of a horse within about 10 minutes of injecting GHRP6.
Eat the ass end of a horse. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that was
we're talking, Dr. Dan. Tell us more.
It will induce so much hunger because it's kind of a ghrelin mimic, and it just drives hunger in some people.
Oh, I thought you were going another way with that, but
that's what I experienced as well. I was doing the Sermorelin for a while with the GHRP2 and the GHRP6, and within 20 minutes of injection, I was ravenous. And like, I eat a lot anyway. I didn't need any help.
This guy he would take it right before he would fall asleep, just so that he could avoid having that hunger come on, because he couldn't control it once it came on.
Mm-hmm.
But these peptides, I mean, they are amazing. I mean, you guys talked about BPC 157 and TB 500. I mean, these are.
That recovered my ACL like that. I mean, I tore my ACL up, and that BPC 157 just game changer.
A lot of professional athletes were using BPC 157 because it doesn't test, or they can't test it because it's out of the system so quick. And the body makes a similar compound as well. But I just saw recently that WADA nailed somebody for BPC 157. So
they're catching on
off the radar for now.
And somewhere in there, you had mentioned a PT peptide, I believe it was.
it was PT 141.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So you guys are familiar with melanotan 2, right?
No.
Okay, melanotan 2 is the Barbie drug. That's the one that you can do injections of this. And
yes, our buddy Mike took this. Do you remember when Mike was doing the tanning injections?
Oh yeah,
and he looked ridiculous.
Oh gosh.
Yes, we are familiar. Our buddy.
I mean, I have to tell you, I've done it because it was really cool. When I first moved to Austin, I spent a lot of time in the sun, and I don't believe in sunscreens. And so I'm out running. I don't want to burn. So I wanted to get a base that would protect me when I was out. So it says, do 10 to 14 days of this tanning injection. And so after about 4 days, I'm thinking, I'm going to have to change my race on my driver's license if I keep doing it. I stopped after 4 days because I got so dark so quickly. And it was just with like 30 minutes a day in the sun on top of it. But the interesting thing about that is the melanotan also increases erections in guys.
And you were running tan with a boner. Nice.
Yeah. Well,
a whole bunch of people driving just pulled over. Their ears perked up.
Oh, there's Dr. Dan. Morning to you.
Maybe I don't need that Gainswave.
No Gainswave. But they decided to isolate that active sexual ingredient from melanotan 2, and they developed PT 141, which is a isolated version of that. And the PT 141 injection will provide females with a 50% more sexually satisfying experience, is the way they phrase it.
50%.
50%.
That's quite the increase, I would say.
Yeah, it
guys
is.
could be buying this for their wives. Like, I don't have to do as much work.
Yeah.
The erections with it are pretty stellar too. I mean, it's like all night long after you do one of these injections, and you get maybe a couple minute breaks in between.
For her sake, not yours, right?
So is this similar to various not necessarily like PRP injections? We've got the O shot, and guys are doing that as well to improve quality. Is it different mechanisms, different pathways?
Yeah, it's working on alpha MSH in the brain. And
okay.
And that's why a lot of people will take, they'll use melanotan 2 to correct or to fix the symptoms of like chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So people with chronic mold issues or chronic Lyme, a lot of the functional medicine docs are guiding people towards the melanotan 2 because it really is essentially an alpha MSH analog. And so it corrects this severe diminishment of alpha MSH in these people that have chronic inflammatory response.
Where can the listeners go to learn more about that particular, or even buy it?
If you just type them in Google, you'll find all kinds of references for them. Okay. They're available through a lot of suppliers in the U.S. and again, not approved for human use. Research only. So.
That is a gold nugget that you just dropped, because there are a tremendous amount of people right now who are dealing with low-level chronic infections, whether it's Lyme or the co-infections, or even they've been exposed to mold. They've changed their environment, but they're still experiencing that chronic inflammatory response in the body. And I wasn't even aware of that as a hack for it. So thank you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. We'll link up with the show notes too.
Yeah, I'm writing everything down feverishly to make sure it all gets into the show notes, because this has been great. Dr. Dan, take us through a little bit of, actually, before you take us through your process, you'd mentioned something interesting about melatonin. And I have noticed clinically that a lot of people don't do well with melatonin, even very small doses. And I think that there's some misconception out there that always indicates stagnation in the liver. You had mentioned that there's a genetic component. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we, part of our workup is we always run genetics on our clients. We have our own reports, and one of the things we look at is melatonin production, melatonin receptors, and we look at genetics of melatonin breakdown. Production can go 50-50. So some people have really good production, some people have a reduction in the amount that they're producing. But they've also got to have good receptor response in order to get a benefit from it. And we find most people have a reduced receptor response to melatonin. Now, melatonin is a great hormone. I mean, it works great for anti-inflammatory, anti-aging aspects, but taking it for sleep tends not to work. And what happens is people will start taking more and more, thinking that, more is better. And then especially if they're slow at metabolizing it, they'll get daytime fatigue, they'll get depression. You get over 3 milligrams a day, your risk of depression goes up dramatically with melatonin. But we always look at the enzymes that break it down. I mean, one of the enzymes that breaks it down is CYP1A2, which breaks down caffeine. So if you're a rapid metabolizer of caffeine, you're also going to rapidly metabolize melatonin. A lot of the other enzymes that do that are female, breaking down the estrogens and things like that. So if female goes through menopause, it allows more availability for the breakdown of melatonin at that point, because they compete with the enzyme. So a woman that goes into menopause that suddenly is saying, well, I'm having trouble sleeping, they may benefit from some melatonin. So, and this is what I get at when I say a systems-based approach. You've got to look at all aspects of why something works or why something does not work.
Yep.
And, genetics helps give us a guidance on that. And that's what I love about the precision aspect of working with an individual and identifying what's going to work for them versus what works for everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, previously we like to use the analogy with our clients. We look at one scene from a movie and then we're asked to just tell them about the movie, right? But in reality, we're just looking at one scene of our body, one scene with these tests, and trying to figure out the whole picture and what's going on with the movie and the characters and the plot and the dramatic climax. But we don't know it all until we look at the whole system. And I think it's beautiful, to your point, that you guys are doing that at the Apeiron Center. Am I right?
Yeah. And that, it's funny because when people come in, the first thing I do with them is I go through their supplements and I say, okay, tell me why you're taking it and what you're measuring to see if it's doing what you think it's doing.
Yeah.
And if they can't answer that, I mark off the supplement. It's off their list. Because
I would imagine people leave taking no supplements.
Well, we put them back on because we identify what we're doing it for and what we're measuring. But this has been a great device in that regard, because the stress scores on the Garmin.
Pointing to his Garmin for those who can't.
That's the Garmin Fenix 5 you mentioned.
Yeah, and the stress scores that you get on there can be tracked to see. So we'll change somebody's dietary pattern, and we're notoriously good liars to ourselves when it comes to whether something's working or not working. Subjectively we will say, oh yeah, it's great. I love the fact that when people go on a new diet, so like people go on the keto diet and they'll say, I've never felt this good. And I said, you know what, you're 2 weeks in, and what's happened is your body has experienced a major stressor because you've changed the environment that the body exists in. Yep. And so what happens is you get huge cortisol releases, which cause some euphoria. I said, wait for a month and see what happens in a month. Yep. And at the end of the month, they're like, God, I feel terrible on this diet. Like,
and just to remind you, you felt that same way about your last diet.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you went paleo, you felt that way when you went vegan. You felt that way when you went carnivore.
But we can measure stress with this watch. And one thing that enlightened me was if I have one glass of wine for about 12 hours, my stress score goes up 20 points every single time I have a glass.
How many points?
20 points.
Whoa.
I mean, my baseline is about 27 for a day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I almost double my stress score for 12 hours anytime I have a glass of wine. So it kind of gave me the feedback that, my body's probably, no matter how much I want to convince myself that's healthy for me, my body's telling me it's not working. And that was so many things with this device. I mean, if I sleep 6 hours in a night, my stress score's up at least 10 to 15 points for the entire next day.
When you drink wine, does your pulse increase as well?
Yeah. Yep. Not my baseline. My baseline still stays, you know, in the mid to high 50s. But my heart rate during the day, it actually goes up in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that as well. And then, you know, talking with a lot of people, particularly when there's autoimmune components, they'll notice maybe they get a little bit more stuffy, or their nose gets runny, or they get a little bit fatigued, things like that, along with it. But
have you seen, well, I think that's a awesome point to maybe explore a little further. Have you seen with your clients that alcohol has that effect as well in terms of the stress increase?
Yeah, and about 80% of them get elevated stress response.
The booze out there, biohackers.
My wife was all excited because she's like, "Look, mine doesn't go up with wine." I'm like, "Oh, great." You know?
Oh no!
Which I was going to ask, because I mean, I wrestle with this and go back and forth, because we're measuring something that is it's one aspect of it. And in the big picture, a lot of times when people are drinking, that's a time of social connection and relief and fun. And I'm like, how do we measure that though? You know, if we're ignoring that and we're only measuring one thing, it can give us a myopic view of the entire.
Limit it to the times when you're doing it for that positive piece then.
I like that. Yes.
Don't
drink it home by yourself.
Yeah, there you go. Don't drink it home alone. That's a rule. Yeah, well, that's a good point. I hope everyone's listening out there. I know I took that away.
And tell us a little bit about your process and the Genomic Guru Kit and how that works. You know, let's say, you know, Carrie and or myself were working with you. Where do we start? How does the way that you investigate genes differ from, say, a 23andMe? And then walk us through that, if you would.
Well, we don't really do our own genetic interpretation anymore. We only work with genetic interpretation with our full concierge clients as far as the physician level. But what we've done is we've created the training academy, which is Apeiron Academy. And we've got over 200 coaches worldwide right now that, I mean, they're physicians, chiropractors, naturopaths, personal trainers, traditional Chinese medicine. I mean, they're in every category that you can imagine. But what we do is we train them in the genetic interpretation we use in our medical practice. And we supply them with the ability to get the genetics and get the reports. And the way we use that, I mean, genetics is nothing more than another biometric. I mean, there's no absolute in genetics. So many people are like, you know, oh, I've got MTHFR, I've got to do folate. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. That's just not the way genetics are designed to be used. You know,
there's a lot of people listening that were like, yeah, I got MTHFR. Yeah, I'm taking methylfolate. Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, I could have been, you know, if I had gotten into the marketing craze and I listed like every symptom that everybody could potentially have, and then said, if you have MTHFR, then we can help you. Well, 25% of the population has MTHFR variants. And so, you know, are you really doing anything for that group? No. I mean, it's one base pair out of 3 billion base pairs in the genome. I mean, 1 in 3 billion that's going to change that kind of an outcome for you? No, it doesn't happen that way. And these aren't mutations. I mean, anybody who calls them a mutation, run from that person because they don't know what they're talking about. MTHFR is a polymorphism. It's a variant. It occurs, to be a mutation, it has to occur in less than 1%. And I just told you it's 25%. So not even close to a mutation. And polymorphisms develop as a benefit in certain environments. So like you see a lot of MTHFR homozygous, which is the risk variant that we call it here in the States. But in Africa, it's the most common variant. And it gives them survival benefit when they have a folate-rich environment. So you get survival benefit of a fetus that carries a homozygous MTHFR when the mother consumes a folate-rich diet. And in Africa, the interesting thing is even in malnourished Africans, they typically have high levels of folate intake. And so there's a benefit for that group. And even like your risk of colon cancer goes down dramatically if you have an MTHFR homozygous and you take a folate-rich diet. What happens in the United States is we focus on folic acid, or we just don't eat a lot of folate. And so we're deficient in folate. So it's not ideal for the gene that we carry. You know, it's just like you look at Inuit Eskimos and everybody's like, oh, well, they eat 80% fat and have no heart disease, so I should do that. Well, no, you're not an Inuit Eskimo. You know, they have genetic variants that have been selected ancestrally over time in that population to thrive in that. You know, DNA is absolutely fascinating with its desire to create changes to have the human population thrive. And so it's constantly making adjustments in order to optimize outcomes, like ApoE4s. You know, people freak out over an ApoE4 because they say, I've got a 30 times increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. Well, you know what? If you don't eat a lot of saturated fat, you know, keep your saturated fat less than 5%, you're not going to have an issue. You can almost take it. You don't smoke, you don't eat a lot of saturated fat, and you exercise, you can take your risk down to the average or less than average with an
detox those heavy metals.
That's right. I mean, you know, you're more prone to mercury toxicity with an ApoE4. You know, all these little things that you just need to understand about the genes you carry and how they affect you. Now, ApoE4s have great protection against infections, especially viral infections. So, you know, you're less likely to get the flu and everything like that when you carry an ApoE4 variant, because it's very common from the African ancestry. They had a lot of exposure to viral illnesses that would kill them, and they had very low exposure to saturated fat. So in that population, it was a survival benefit. But now we've merged all these populations into this melting pot, and now the genetics gives us that ability to look at them and say, you know, what kind of genetics do I carry? What kind of dietary pattern is going to help me to thrive by nutrigenetically matching my dietary and lifestyle pattern to the genetics that I've inherited?
Yes, and I do believe that is the next frontier. And I'm very curious on how you guys interpret the genetic information and use that to create personalized nutrition recommendations. Because there are people that are going to thrive on a carnivore diet, and there's people that are going to thrive on a strict vegan diet, and then everywhere in between. And our genes and our enzyme production and our current health status all play a big role in determining where along that continuum we should be. What is your process like in helping people to determine the foods that they should be eating rather than, you know, the current fad diet or popular diet?
Well, in our nutrition template, we look at about 130 different genes, and this is strictly nutrition. This is not supplements or anything like that. So we look at about 130 different gene polymorphisms. We break it down into your response to carbohydrates, where we look at about 25 different variants. We look at fats, but fats should never have been considered a macronutrient. You know, every fat, saturated fat, omega-9, omega-6, omega-3, they're completely different nutrients. And we've grouped them together as fats, and that was a big mistake. But that's one we're trying to correct. So we break it down into your response to the different types of fats so that we can fine tune that macronutrient. We also look at protein and your response to protein. We look at your response to plant sterols. I mean, there's some people that have to eat, that shouldn't be eating a vegetarian diet just because their response to plant sterols will increase their heart disease risk. So we're looking at insulin resistance genes. You know, sometimes you carry genes that give you that predisposition towards diabetes. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just means that there's things that you need to do in order to mitigate that risk that you carry. And foods aren't just nutrients. Foods are bioactive compounds. I mean, they interact with the human system. And so, you know, this big argument in the last month of, you know, is fish oil good for you, or does it do nothing? You know, you got to mix, and you've got really well-known researchers that are coming out with completely opposite ends of the spectrum as to what that is. And I hate population studies research. I mean, it's just the biggest waste of time, because one, especially when it comes to nutrition, you can't control for anything. I mean, even in the Stanford A to Z study, you know, they had the people on the Atkins diet, and they had the people on the vegetarian diet, and by the time the study ended, they were almost eating the identical diet. I mean, they had merged this middle ground.
Yeah.
So you can't control for that. And, you know, if you're giving somebody, you know, capsules of fish oil and they're sitting around eating cheeseburgers and French fries all day long,
Yeah.
you know, it's not going to do anything for them. But
not all fish oil is created equal too. It's all.
that's right. I mean, you've got to look at the different types. You've got to look at how it's extracted.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of importance in understanding that bioactive nutrient. But what we do understand is epigenetics, and epigenetics has solid research in the fact that, you know, you take fish oil, and fish oil will upregulate the metabolic genes in about 40 different categories that they know of. It will downregulate pro-inflammatory gene expression. So the messenger RNA production goes down dramatically with fish oil. So epigenetics kind of gives us that answer. It's just like, you know, why is exercise beneficial? I mean, hell, you exercise and you have the highest reactive oxygen species that you can create in a day. I mean, it's hugely inflammatory, and yet it's healthy for you, and you get micro tears in the muscle, and this is healthy for the human system. Well, what we found was in epigenetics, there's upregulation of PPAR gamma, there's upregulation of PPAR-GC1A, there's upregulation of AMPK. These are all genes that promote longevity, that promote healthy metabolism, that promote mitochondrial health. So the system is adjusting, and you know, the human system is a truly adaptive system, and it has this little range that it functions in that we call the familiar zone. And as long as you're functioning within that familiar zone, there's no inducement for the genes to change. It's when you start extending out of that comfort zone, that familiar zone, a little bit on a regular basis, that all of a sudden the body says, you know, this is an unfamiliar environment. I'm not adapted to this environment, so I have to adjust expressions. And we see this with people going through weight loss programs. They'll do exercise and weight loss, coming off the couch and, you know, eating poorly, and they go into nutrition and fitness. And for 3 months, they lose 20 pounds and they're on top of the world. And then the next 3 months, they do the exact same thing and nothing happens. And what's happened is that familiar zone shifted. So it went into that new zone where the body says, I don't have to make any changes. I'm doing fine right here. And so that adaptation of the human body is really cool. The Phoenix 5 actually has it's got a diagram in it on training status, and it will actually shift your familiar zone based on your training load each week.
Garmin, give him a sponsorship deal already. Third pitch. Get him. I'm going to call Garmin after this.
I'm going to pick up a Phoenix 5 at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Dr. Dan, you were just talking about the Phoenix 5, and you've piqued my interest in this device. Is it transmitting 24/7? Are you able to put it in airplane mode? Just for the people that are a little bit conscientious about the interaction between EMFs and melatonin suppression and some of the other ways that they can influence our biology. What's going on there?
Yeah, you can turn it off on the communications mode and just sync it once a day if you want. You know, you can decide what to do with that. I have a lot of people asking about that, because we do a lot of environmental health and EMF mitigation and things like that are really important to us. But I think a lot of people have misconceptions about it too. I mean, wearable devices, it's like 2 millivolts a day versus 10,000 millivolts you get from your cell phone. I mean, you know, it's a drop in the bucket in that regard. It's just, you know, it's kind of the same process of people fear those scanners at the airport, yet they fly during the daytime hours and get exposed to 1,000 times more ionizing radiation from their flight than they get from that scanner. It's just, you know, there's a lot of fear-based marketing out there. You know, a lot of these health-based websites want to scare the crap out of you with their marketing approaches to get you to buy some new device that they have or to follow them. And, you know, that's always frustrated me. We've never believed in negative marketing. And that's one policy that we have, is that we will not market fear. We only market excitement.
I like that.
So
I like that a lot too. And it's part of our mission is having a positive impact on people, and, you know, giving them a few of the tools that will really have a big impact, because most of us don't want to do 1,000 biohacks every day. We want to employ a few biohacks that will make a big difference, so that our quality of life and our fitness and our mind and everything is just better. But too many small incremental things, it just starts to stress you out at a certain point. And I think that's kind of what happens when companies use fear mongering or focus on things that don't really matter that much.
For sure.
But you make a good point. I mean, you know, all these biohackers out there, I mean, they're having to do these N of ones, and very few of them have guidance. I mean, even in doing peptides, you know, I had one guy contact me who had done like 6 times the normal dose of melanotan.
Oh, geez.
Like,
he had a massive boner for years.
Well, it makes you nauseated, and it can actually cause rhabdomyolysis if you overdose.
Oh,
you know, people look at these things as benign, but they're not benign. And we need people out there that can at least provide the education that's not Google, you know, because there's so much that you find out there that is just way off base, and you don't know who to trust and who not to trust. That's one of the things we're trying to create, this army of coaches that's going to be out there that understands biohackers and the special needs of the biohacker. You know, because they're
special needs. That's
Get them a short one.
They need certain care and mitigation in many cases to help guide them in what they're doing.
Yeah, it's true. For the record, the Phoenix 5 online, it looks like it's around $500. Am I right? 500 to 700.
Usually around 800 to 850 with the 5X plus.
That's the new version. Okay.
5X plus.
So for those interested, you want to hit the rapid fire round?
I have to give you one more plug. The 5X plus, you can actually load your music on it and use wireless earbuds with the music.
Wow.
You don't have to carry your phone with you.
And it tells you when you have to go to the bathroom, right?
It does, yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic. And right before we dive into the rapid fire round, because I mean you've got my brain lit up. I'm curious about some of the other things that you look for in your Genomic Guru Kit. And for people listening who want to check this out, Dr. Dan's been kind enough to hook up a $300 discount. So instead of spending $697 on a kit, you can get it for $397 at bestbiohacks.com/gene kit, GeneKit. So that's the URL if you want to check it out. We'll put it in the show notes too. But Dr. Dan, tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you look for beyond genetics and polymorphisms.
Well, when we do a workup with a new client, we're looking at we look at their genetic data. We run them through the 85-page report of that. We look at epigenetic age. Epigenetic age is really cool. It's a fairly new marker. It's developed out of Dr. Horvath's lab. Steve Horvath looked at epigenetic marks on the DNA, and
that's the MyDNAge test, right? The Horvath clock.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is we used to use telomeres, and telomeres are just, you know, if you're not looking at the shortest grouping, you're not really getting all the information, and you don't want to do it every year. I mean, every 3 to 5 years is kind of the ideal. Epigenetic age is great because you can do it a couple months apart and really tell if you're having an impact on something you've changed in your lifestyle that will reverse age you by epigenetic age. So we do the epigenetic age. We do the Dutch test. So we look at metabolism of the hormones to correlate that with the genetics. We do an extensive amount of blood work on people. We don't look at a lot of things like microbiome or food allergy. We don't do a lot of functional medicine testing just because I don't feel like there's good science behind a lot of it right now, especially microbiome. We don't have a good
there's not a lot of actionable recommendations that can be taken from those tests right now.
Well, that's the thing. One, we can't get an idea of what's happening. I mean, if you do a colonic biopsy, a colonic sampling versus a stool sample, you're going to get 3 different outcomes on the microbiome. And so what's accurate? We don't know. And then once you do know something, what do you do about it? I mean, you know, the one Hadza guy who took a turkey baster and squirted Hadza stool up his butt and shifted his microbiome that way, but he was living with the Hadza at the time. So his lifestyle really accommodated to that new microbiome. He moved back to Chicago, and sure enough, his stool microbiome reverted to what he was before. So it's all about that lifestyle that you're practicing, and you've got to be making changes in that to shift the microbiome. But we'll do cognitive testing. We do pretty extensive cognitive testing with some, just some online testing. And then we do a psychophysiologic stress profile where we hook people up to a machine that looks like a lie detector, and we take them through 5 stressors, and we measure what happens with their skin conductance, skin temperature, respirations in the chest and belly, HRV, muscle tension, expired carbon dioxide levels. And we see if during these stressors, what happens in the physiology, what happens when the stressor is removed, does it get back to baseline or does it stay up? Great insight with that test. It's amazing. We do QEEG brain mapping, and we look for brainwave patterns that are for performance, not for disease, because a lot of high performers have abnormal brain scans. And if you try to train that out of somebody who's an exceptional performer, you will probably take away their gift. So you have to look at it from that perspective, not of let's compare you to the average, which is what the current neurofeedback centers do, is they compare you to an average database, which nobody wants to be average.
Mm.
We do body scans. We do Neufit neuromapping. So we take DC current, run it all over your body, and see. Are you guys familiar with Neufit technology?
No. Neurofit, you said?
It's Neufit, Neufit,
Heard of it loosely, but-
NEU.FIT. Well, you got some people in your area that do it. They actually ran a training in Tampa down that way. Ben Pekulski's lab up in Tampa, they actually have one there.
Oh, nice.
We were gonna go up there and hang out.
Yeah, Ben's a friend of mine. We were hanging out up there with the last trip we went to Sarasota. Great facility. But they do have a Neufit up there, and you should check it out. It
Yeah,
really is
for sure.
nice. But what we do with that is I'll spend 3 hours with a new client the first day, just in the initial intake, get to know them, get to know their goals, find out what they're doing. They go through all this testing over the next, day and a half. And then at the end of the second day, I sit down with them for about 3 hours. We bring all the testing results together. We come up with a plan based on their goals and steps in getting them there.
This is great. All right, fantastic. Dr. Dan, if you're up for it, a couple rapid fire questions.
Absolutely.
All right, nice.
Right.
Is there anything that you're amazing at? Is there anything that you're amazing at that everyone else is terrible at?
Procrastination. I'm really, really good at procrastination.
I'm great at that too. Especially when it comes to meditation, journaling, working out. What movie, book, or podcast episode changed your life?
That would be the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn.
Nice.
Nice. I haven't heard of that one before. What was the last book you read and loved?
I don't read books. I listen to books.
That counts. Me too.
Yeah.
I read a little bit, but not as much.
Probably Peak Performance, I think, was the last one that I listened to. It was just a week or two ago.
I just saw Jay Ferrugia, who's been on the podcast at least once, post about that. What's your definition of healthy?
Healthy is where no matter what your brain wants to do, you can always call on your body to perform. And you're never at that point where the brain wants to do something and you just say, my body's not capable of doing it.
That's a great definition.
Yeah. What one biohack, lifestyle change, or habit has had the biggest impact on your quality of life?
Sleep, by far. I was a surgeon. I was on call 24/7 when I was a surgeon. I had stress in my life that I would lay in bed, stare at the ceiling at night, play through every surgery I did that day going, oh, I should have done that because it's going to wake me up tonight. When I left surgery and I started sleeping, I got rid of the beeper. My life changed dramatically. I mean, in the time when I retired from surgery, or I didn't retire, I just walked away from it one day. But I had done my telomere test, the first one, and it told me I was 10 years over my chronologic age from a biology standpoint. It was eye-opening to me, especially since when I first went into medical school, people were calling me Doogie Howser because I looked so young. And phenotypically, I did. I looked a lot older than my age at that time. And that was after 10 years of doing surgery. And the stress, the poor eating habits, I was drinking a 6-pack of Mountain Dew a day. I exercised. I was never overweight or anything, but I was never fit and healthy. But I started meditating and started sleeping. But the sleep by far, I love sleep. I mean, we don't appreciate sleep as much as we really need to.
Yeah. How young are you now?
52.
Nice. For those listening, he looks pretty damn good for 52. I will say.
Well, I still think I look older than my age, but my telomeres are now down to about 2 years older than my chronologic age.
Oh, well, that's pretty good.
I've made progress.
Yeah. Nice work. What telomere testing laboratory are you using?
LifeLength.
LifeLength, yeah. And they test the critically short telomeres too, right?
Right. The philosophy is, most of these testers measure average length. But if you're in a room full of dynamite, do you want to know the average length of the fuses or the length of the shortest fuses?
Right. Yeah. We were approached by a company that wasn't looking at some of that stuff to sponsor the podcast, and we chose not to for that reason.
Because we only bring you guys the best listening.
Yes.
And what we actually believe in. That's the truth, though. We get approached by a lot of sponsors that, we love to have sponsors, but frankly, if we don't believe in their product or service, we don't even pitch it because we're all about integrity here.
It won't get mentioned.
Yeah.
Dr. Dan, what does your weekly training schedule kind of look like if you were to give us an elevator pitch version?
I do a lot of strength training. So usually 4 days a week of strength training. And then I will usually go, I don't like running long distances for sure. I don't like running, period, but I do it. And I can enjoy a short 2 to 3 mile run, even up to 5 miles sometimes. I'll do that maybe once or twice a week, but then I will do interval runs, which I absolutely love. I love going full out sprint for 30 seconds and then, a jog for 1.5 minutes and then sprinting again. And I also do a lot of indoor climbing, which has been
nice.
That's, indoor climbing was interesting to me because it was almost like exercise and chess together, because you have to become so interoceptive with the body's abilities. You're looking at a route and planning a route, and you're assessing, do you have the strength to lunge for that? And then once you do, will you have the grip strength to hold it? And if you get that, are you going to have to make another quick move? So the strategic component of climbing, along with the strength aspect of it, has just been fascinating to me. I mean, I love it.
And it points out compensatory behavior, for example, using too much upper body and not enough lower body, where you get halfway up the wall and your arms are on fire and you can't grip the grips because you're doing everything with your upper body. And that usually translates to other things like striking or martial arts and things too.
Yeah.
Cool. What's your favorite supplement?
I don't do a lot of, I take that back. I do a multivitamin, I do fish oil, I do vitamin D. Those are the cores. So I stick with those on a regular basis. Right now, I'm mostly.
Yeah. Like, who's the half naked teenager?
That's the 17-year-old that didn't realize he was on video.
Oh, great.
We're keeping it real.
Yeah, love it. He works out. You climb? What's up?
Yeah, I'm not big on a lot of supplements unless they're very directed. And I go through stages of that. I mean, I'll have times when I'll take 14, 15 pills a day, and other times where I'm down to 5 or 6, which is my core. I stick with the core, but most of the time it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to accomplish something, like I'll be on a growth phase or a cutting phase, and I'll adjust my supplements based on that. But I'm not like a lot of these anti-aging docs that feel like they have to take all these different pills. You look at Ray Kurzweil and he takes 52 different pills. Dave Asprey. I mean, they're just way over managing the human system when you can focus on the lifestyle pieces much better.
What fish oil do you take? better question.
The Apeiron brand fish oil.
Oh, there you go. Okay, they got their own fish oil, guys. There you go. Check it out.
Apeiron.store. That's the
If
site.
nothing else, pick up their fish oil.
Yeah, that's Apeiron.store.
Yep, it's Apeiron.
Beautiful.
Cool.
And last one, what one lifestyle change, biohack, or habit do you believe would have the greatest impact on the world if everyone started doing it right now? And I have a feeling I know where you're going to go.
Yeah, it's sleeping. Yeah, I mean, it's if we could get people in healthy sleeping routines, I mean, it would just it changes things so much with the outcome. And I know it sounds like I preach this sleeping thing, but you know, you're talking to somebody who has experience on both ends of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, everybody I work with, sleep is the number one issue I run into. And you know, there's people out there that would do anything for a good night's sleep, and it's a simple process.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dan, for people listening who are driving in their car or working out and they know they need more sleep, but when it comes down to it, you know, they're binge watching Netflix or on their phone or just not getting to bed on time, how do you advise that they get started with building a better routine?
What we do is we typically do a 30-day sleep hygiene protocol. So we get them to commit to absolutely no variation in this for 30 days. And what you do is you pick a specific bedtime. You say, okay, what would your normal wake up time be without an alarm? And we work back 8 hours from there. And we say, okay, that is the time you're going to bed. So if it's 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10:30, whatever it is, that's when you go to bed every night. Black out the room, sit and meditate, do some alpha training if you need to, do some breath work, whatever you need to do. You can actually sit in bed and read under some amber light. That's fine too. But no technology within an hour or two of bed. We also want them to have a couple hours between the last meal and bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then no alarm. So they have to go through and not do the alarm. Now it's hard for some people to do that have to get up for work and things like that. But, you know, I've told people, I told them to change their job because their sleep patterns were so dysregulated because of the type of work that they were doing or how far they had to travel to work each day. It's not worth it. I mean, you know, for, 10 years of shift work will age the brain 16 years.
Wow.
I mean, that's profound.
Yeah.
You know, that's just not worth it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Dan, this has been amazing. Where can listeners stay up to date with everything you're working on with the Apeiron Center and upcoming projects?
The best place to kind of look for us is either on the Facebook group, Apeiron Center for Human Potential, or Instagram, which is Apeiron Me, M-E. Get it, limitless me.
Nice. I like it. Okay.
Beautiful. And we've got a link that we'll include in the show notes along with the Facebook group and the Instagram. We'll link to the bestbiohacks.com/gene kit for those of you guys that want to do the Genomic Guru test and save $300 on that.
I'm doing that.
I want to do it as well. I'm excited about this. Dr. Dan, you are
an hour with somebody who actually understands all this. I mean, we've certified these coaches. So spending an hour with somebody interpreting your genetics is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your head is in the right place with a lot of these things. And I appreciate that. I've had a lot of fun hanging out, and I'm sure this could be a 12-hour episode. So
yeah, this was fun.
We'll have you back at some point in the future if you're game.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dan.
All right.